Welcome to Two Hypnotherapists Talking. We are two established hypnotherapists based on either side of the pond. I'm Martin in Preston, UK.
And I'm Denise in Delaware, USA. Whether you're curious, an avid fan, or a fellow practitioner, I'm sure you'll find something of interest in our weekly conversations with each other and our various guests.
While we both practice hypnosis, we are interested in other aspects of self-help and personal development. So please sing out if you have something to say or want clarification. Our contact details are in the show notes.
So, Martin, let's get on with this week's episode.
Yeah, okay. Okay, Denise, here we go, episode 7.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, how are you?
It goes really fast. And this is being recorded only a couple of days before I has to go out. So yeah, we did get ahead of ourselves for a bit, but never lasts, unfortunately. I think that when you and I were talking earlier about what we should speak about, we were talking about maybe just go back a little bit to the basics in case there's any people wandering through who might become interested in hypnosis or questions about hypnosis. Why don't we talk just a little bit about the history?
Yeah, okay.
Let's see, modern practice.
Yeah.
I don't mean 1980s, from Mesmer on, when hypnotism, the name hypnotism was attached after Mesmer.
Yeah. Well, mesmerized.
He calls it mesmerizing, yeah. But most people, when they think about hypnosis, can trace it back to Mesmer and Freud, believe it or not. We'll get to that in a bit.
Okay, yeah. We said we'd chat today about what we're going to include in the next series because we're going to cover a lot of things, aren't we, in the next series as well?
Yes, and that's also as a call out on here to anybody from ancillary mental health areas who would like to talk to us about what they practice, the CBT people. I can't even think. I think too much about hypnosis these days. I've lost all the other names, but all the other varieties of therapy, talk therapy, that's out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe not a lot of people know that the actual term hypnosis was Braid, wasn't it?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, back in 1843.
You may have a lot of people saying, "Who the heck's Braid?" Braid was a Scottish surgeon.
He was.
Who promoted hypnotism a great deal and did surgery under hypnosis. You think it's got a lot of very practical uses as well as the more esoteric ones.
Yeah, what's interesting though is he started with the term hypnosis and then wanted to change it, didn't he?
I don't think that would have caught on at all.
It's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it?
Yeah. The only issue that most of us have is you're not really asleep. It's just before you go to sleep. It's not really hypnosis yet.
No, that's how I always describe it to people. I always say it's just that bit when you're just on the edge of falling asleep.
Right. When somebody says, "Are you awake?" and you have to think about the answer.
Yeah.
That's where you are.
Or I always say when you've been in a daydream.
Daydream is self-hypnosis. That's what you're doing. You go somewhere else in your head.
Yeah, absolutely. If ever you were in a daydream at school back in the day and the teacher saw it, they'd throw the board eraser at you.
Which came as sudden shock, you didn't see it coming.
Yeah. Oh dear. Yeah, so I mean, we'll go into that in a little bit more detail, I think, in the next series.
That is a quick shout out to anybody who may be listening, who is a practitioner of the other adjacent arts. We would love to talk to you and maybe have you come on the show and talk about your practice. Because I think the more we can know, the better off we all are, right?
Well, yeah, including things such as NLP, etc.
Right, which NLP, of course, grew out of hypnotism, although a lot of people think, no, it didn't. Yes, it did.
Yes, it did. And Richard Bandler will be the first to say that as well.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning, because we always confuse people by sort of jumping in and talking all over the place.
Okay.
What would you like to talk about first, Martin?
What I thought was we could talk about what we could talk about in the next series today, because as you say, there's the science of hypnosis, that sort of exploring the neurological underpinnings of hypnosis.
And indeed, give a shout out to the people who do listen to this faithfully. If there is a topic within hypnosis or the adjacent sciences that you'd like to discuss or hear discussed, we would love to have your opinion on what would be a good topic. Because obviously seven seasons in, we're like, ooh, we said that before.
Yeah, well, this is it. I mean, maybe we can revisit something in more detail as well anyway. But you know, we can talk about the altered brainwave states and altered states of consciousness, can't we, in more detail? We've only ever skimped over them. We can go into them in more detail.
Yeah. And the more diagnostic studies that are done, the more those things can be explained, because of course they didn't have EEGs back in the day.
No.
So.
No, I mean, so much more can actually be proven now, can't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And then again, we have touched on this one before, but there are so many common misconceptions about hypnosis, aren't there?
Yeah.
So I think we should dedicate a whole episode to that as well.
Yes, I think
in the next series.
Yeah. In fact, again, asking for our audience input, if you'd like to tell either or both of us what misconceptions you had before you learned about hypnosis, and if you're brave enough and you still have, that would be fine. It would be good to be able to talk about actual real-time issues.
Yeah, I mean, the two biggest misconceptions I come across, though, is one, is it real?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And two, is it mind control?
Yeah. The mind control is probably the most universal. You're going to make me do things. You can't make people do things. You can help them do the things they've decided to do. You cannot control them. Yeah.
I mean, I think it would be a good idea to make one of the episodes sort of talking about, say, Ericksonian hypnosis against NLP techniques, and then discuss the Milton model and the meta model, because a lot of people might not know what that is. Or they may do. Maybe they want to come on the show and talk to us about them.
There you go. That would be good. With some of the other people that we've had on as guests. Yeah. So what aspect of hypnosis first drew you to hypnosis? What was what made you look at it beyond the, oh yeah, kind of interesting?
Well, when I'd experienced EMDR, as you remember, I'd had EMDR, which I'm adamant is a form of hypnosis.
And for those people who do not know what those initials stand for, because they may not have listened to all of the other shows before.
Eye movement desensitization reprocessing. So when we think of hypnosis in its very basic form, we tend to think of swinging watches, don't we?
Yeah, well, that's the cliche, yeah.
Yeah, that's the cliche, yeah. And eye movement desensitization reprocessing does use that bilateral stimulation of moving the eyes from left to right. And Francine Shapiro, who is credited with creating EMDR, people are quoting or misquoting her over the years, and different people are coming out with different theories. Nobody knows exactly how it works. Even she didn't. That's on the record, as it were. And people these days, because she's now passed, people these days are saying, oh, it absolutely replicates REM sleep, that's why it's the eye movement, etc. It's a good theory, but it's not proven.
Somebody with an MRI machine is somewhere near here thinking about how they can prove one way or another.
Whether it's because that gives you absolute focus and concentration or not, perhaps.
Well, it does allow you, because you're thinking about moving your eyes. You can't do two things at once.
No.
Many people have tried. It doesn't work. And so you're catching your brain basically by making it follow this thing. You're doing this.
Perhaps that's just bypassing the critical factor, because it's occupying the left prefrontal cortex, isn't it? It's occupying the intellectual side of the brain if we're having to think about watching these lights. So yes, anything else that goes in the ears will go in readily.
It's a very useful technique. So what was your experience of it briefly? People can scroll back through the previous episodes where you've talked about it before.
Wonderful.
How soon after you started doing that did you find relief?
2 sessions.
Yeah.
Two sessions.
Do you remember how you felt after the first session?
Slightly woozy and a little disorientated as I drove home, and it started to rain, and I put the window wipers on in the car.
Oh, and you went right back into it. Yeah. You have to be careful about that.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that hypnotists, if you see people in the office and then they're going to have to go deal with getting themselves home, you have to make sure they're really awake before they leave, because it is very easy to slip back in.
Oh yeah.
So it's another lovely thing about working online is that people are usually in their own homes and they can just drift off.
Yeah, they can just drift off.
Hey, take a nap.
Yeah, no, it's true that, because even when somebody's just undergone usual hypnotic trance, as they come round, you're at that point as if you've had a nap in the afternoon where you're waking up and it's like, oh no, I just want to go back to sleep.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or that, is it Sunday? Can I stay here?
Yeah. And so, yeah, you were asking me, did I find it beneficial? Absolutely, I did. But mine, when I look at what I underwent at the time, it was EMDR for trauma, immediately followed by, in inverted commas, relaxation, which was basically hypnotic trance. So of course,
you didn't explain what the trauma was for those who don't want to scroll back and listen to your earlier stuff. The trauma was.
Yeah, I was robbed.
and guns were involved.
Yeah.
It's not terribly English, really.
Yeah,
yes.
I know. But yeah, I was stuck in that trauma loop of just not being able to break my thought processes away from it. It was the first thing on my mind every day and the last thing on my mind.
Yeah, and you gave up your job because of it.
Yeah.
As a jeweler, obviously, being robbed has to be somewhere near the top of the things that could be bad about your business.
Yeah, same as working in a bank, I suppose, or something like
probably,
that.
or post office.
Yeah. So yeah, I found it incredibly effective, which gave me that fascination. It was like, wow, what did I just undergo? How was that?
Okay.
So how did that make such a phenomenal change in such a short space of time?
So how did you find the answers to those questions?
Well, I was told what I was having done when they did the EMDR. What they hadn't explained to me was, and we'll do some relaxation afterwards. They just said that when I was done.
Was this person an EMDR practitioner? Was this a psychologist who just used that technique of the many they know?
This was a psychotherapist who just used that technique.
That was the only one he or she used?
Yeah, I was referred there by a psychiatrist.
Okay.
This was private healthcare here in the UK, so this wasn't NHS. And this was private healthcare. My psychiatrist said, I'm going to send you to see our therapist for some sessions. And the therapist said, we are going to, I had a chat with him on the first occasion, and they said, well, next week when you come back, we're going to do some treatment. And I said, okay, I'm game, as it were. Right. And they explained to me something about, well, we're going to get your eyes moving. It's a very specialized technique. I'll explain it to you next time. So I went there the next time, and they told me the very familiar, because I've heard it so many times now, story of Francine Shapiro walking through the woods and the lights coming through the trees and her eyes moving, and she wondered why she felt better every time she'd done that walk. So you're familiar with the story as well.
It's not just the exercise that's good for you.
Yeah. Well, then again, you see, we talk about the something sides nowadays that we kick up when we're kicking leaves up, all the essential oils. Maybe it was those as well helping.
A little of everything. Lots of things are there to help us. So you did that. How long after that did you actually get to the point where you studied hypnosis?
Not that long afterwards, about 6 months after, because I was sort of still recovering from it and trying to think, well, what do I want to do now? Because I didn't want to go back to the shop. It was like, well,
but that wasn't a fear response. I'm reaching a point where I don't want to do this manual labor all the time.
It was that. It was also okay. I'm not terrified anymore, but I just don't want it to happen again. Yeah. And also, of course, the arthritis in the fingers, which and eyesight failing, and it was like, maybe all these things coming together are just telling me it's a good time to do something else. Whilst the idea of lying on a beach for the rest of my days and doing nothing was quite appealing, it wasn't really me.
And it's you still got to feed the butcher and all the other people that you need in your life. So did you search for somebody who could teach you hypnosis?
Not initially.
Did you happen across somebody?
No, not initially. I started to just search online for information on hypnosis, and there's loads out there. So I was sorting through the wheat and the chaff, as it were. I did a couple of quite long online courses. We're not talking sit and watch a few videos. We're talking online courses which had a lot of detailed writing you had to do back, assignments and that kind of thing. Part of which was you had to start practicing on people, which was great fun. And then I thought, right, okay. And I kept picking it up and putting it down because I was enjoying doing nothing as well for a while.
It's a little nothing is nice. A lot of nothing is hardly pocketbook usually.
picking it up and putting it down. And then I decided to think, right, I need to do this formally now. I need to do this properly. And again, there are lots of different types of hypnosis schools out there and techniques out there. And I found one that I felt was a good fit for me because it would give me at the end of it the National Council for Hypnotherapy qualification. And that would allow me to join the CNHC register, the Complementary Natural Healthcare Council register. Right. And in the UK, if you went to your GP over here and said, hey, GP, can you recommend me a hypnotherapist? He or she has to consult that list. They can only recommend somebody on that list. So that register. So I'm on that register.
So you knew it was a legitimate training person. Because obviously anybody can throw a shingle at most countries, most states in the US. It's unregulated, and people do need to be careful.
Yeah, it is.
And worry about those people that do the weekend courses and call themselves a hypnotist.
Yeah, I mean, it's unregulated over here. Anybody can call themselves a hypnotherapist. However, if you want to do it seriously and properly, then you want to get the right qualifications. You want to get onto the right register. The registers where a GP will recommend you. That's the kind of thing you want to do. So I found a school that was a good fit for me, and that's how I learnt now. Back in the day.
Does it being on the register mean that the NHS will pay for it?
No, not as yet, because the NHS still won't pay. But as I say, if you go to your GP and say, can you recommend a hypnotherapist? They have to choose somebody off that register.
Right, yeah. They know it's legit.
Yeah.
So
they know you've reached a certain standard.
Right.
And you adhere to a code of practice.
It's a shame. It's a shame because I know that it's also the first thing that should be suggested to people with certain conditions is hypnosis. And yet, even though it's the best thing for most people, it's interesting they don't want to cough up the money for it. I mean, I could see them, why don't you pay $30 or some pounds or whatever for the technique, keeping it very low. Most people would want to be in private practice anyway, national.
And yet, of course, the NHS pay quite happily for EMDR.
That's just wrong.
They pay for EMDR. They recommend EMDR as a treatment, as a recognised treatment, even though there's no more scientific proof for it than there is for hypnosis.
And is there, now, what qualifications does an EMDR person need in order for them to get paid by the NHS?
Right, they have to be BACP registered.
Okay. Which stands for?
British Association of Summit Psychotherapists.
Okay. So they have to be psychologists.
Yeah, they have to be psychologists or similar. Because basically the EMDR Association keep it as a very closed shop. It is very much a closed shop. But EMDR is another unregulated treatment over here. It's actually unregulated.
Hypnosis is most of the states.
Yeah.
And the regulation that's in place in the two states where it is regulated is really, send in your coupon.
But it sort of begs the question then, if we were to say EMDR is a hypnosis technique in essence, a form of hypnosis,
then you'd think that hypnosis would be accepted treatment, at least for some conditions, and there's well documented.
Or other forms of hypnosis, such as specific forms of hypnosis, like solution-focused hypnosis, for example, rather than perhaps say regressive hypnosis.
Yes, most of us try not to use that because
I don't use it. I don't use it, but we did have that wonderful conversation, and we had it with an open mind when we welcomed your ex-tutor on the show. And I still remember she said one thing, and it just made me think when she said, "Have you never had deja vu?" I thought, yes.
Actually, if there's because she does practice that, we should perhaps in our list of things. I'm sure she'd be happy to come back on the show and talk.
Oh, I'd be delighted to welcome her back on. Yeah,
I haven't talked to her for a while. I really should.
Yeah,
that's the trouble. Living in Delaware with a tutor in California, you don't bump into them very often.
But as I say, we welcome all our guests with an open mind, don't we? We are respectful of all of them. But I have my views on regression therapy. But I welcomed her with an open mind. And as soon as she said, "Have you never had deja vu?" I thought, right, okay, I'm listening.
Yeah.
So, okay. I mean, we could do another episode talking about the actual power of suggestion and what do we mean by suggestion.
When I try to break that down in my head, I always think of parents like maneuvering their children to suggest something, you know.
So like a double blind. Do you want to clean your bedroom before or after your tea?
Yeah, that's one of those things. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's a suggestion, isn't it? But it's a double blind question. Interestingly, just as a side note, dear listeners and viewers, I've got to answer some questions, and one of them is about Socratic questioning. And I was going to put, is there a better way to ask this question as the answer? But they might think I'm being sarcastic.
Who can argue with Socrates?
Yeah. The other thing is that I thought we could talk about is when we talk about it every week, but the unconscious mind, the subconscious mind, because we know it's a metaphor. We can't point to it, can we?
Yes, there's no particular spot in the brain where it lives.
Yeah, we can point to all the other bits with the big names, and people like you even know them all.
Or at least I can remember that I ought to know them. Yeah.
I can remember most of them too. But I think, because people make so many.
Oh, it's a silly, but I would love to talk about homunculus when we do whatever we're doing where things live in the brain. I would love to bring up the homunculus.
Oh, enlighten me. Tell me a little bit about it.
The homunculus is that sort of weird looking body that you see in some anatomy books when they're talking about the brain. It's how your brain thinks. Your right hand, if you're right-handed, is huge compared to other parts of your anatomy. Yeah, it's
come back to me now. It's come back to me now. Yeah, I remember it. Yeah. Okay. What about here's an interesting one: hypnosis and spirituality. Because when we think about things like
the 1800s.
Yeah, but when we think of things like altered states of consciousness, inner peace, there's certain similarities there, isn't there?
Those people who have post-death experiences and got brought back, and nobody knows quite what that is. I mean, most of us have our theories, but it's difficult to prove things.
Yeah, I mean, well, there you go. You as a doctor, you must have had experience of somebody who'd flatlined and then been kapowed and brought back.
Yeah? That isn't nearly as upsetting to me as when you've explained to the family how their loved one is now essentially not there anymore, and we're going to put them in so that we have to wait a certain period of time before we can turn off the machines. And then there's a miracle, and they come back and they're just as fine as they were before they went.
Okay, has that happened to you as a doctor?
Yes, it has happened to me as a doctor. It's embarrassing, really, but I'm very happy for her and her husband.
Well, you got it wrong, but boy, are we glad you did.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's so much we don't know.
No, of course there is.
And of course, this is one of the things that there are still some people who feel that hypnosis is insulting to God in some ways.
Okay.
Or it's not exactly a sin, but it's whatever that is that you shouldn't be messing with it.
It's the dark arts.
Yes, the dark arts. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I definitely feel that God has given us an incredible number of things that we can do to help us in this world, and we really should pay more attention. And use those things He's given us.
Yeah, I mean, when we think about things like, for example, power of human connection. Okay, now I'll take the traditional religious aspect out of it. Think of a crowd at a football match or a pop concert. Okay, that same uplifting thing whenever
group hypnosis.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
When everybody's eyes are fixed on one thing and everybody's just so uplifted and feels fantastic. Because you can literally walk away from, say, a stadium where you've watched a huge game or your team win or something with absolute euphoria, can't you?
One of the reasons that, although neither of us practice group hypnosis very often, and that tends to be most people's experience of that is with stage hypnosis, which neither of you or I do. No. But it is the weight loss program that I'm running at the moment. The point of that is, obviously hypnosis and weight loss and hypnosis and just about anything go together, but it's almost an extra good thing for an extra fill up for the clients, because they don't just hear me talking to them about positive things that are happening, but they hear from other people going through the same experience that they are. Yeah,
so the whole thing is uplifting, isn't it?
Right. And it's one of the areas where most the things that trigger you eating are pretty well known, and so you can cover everything. It's because everybody experiences hypnosis and goes under for different reasons. You'd have to, go through 20 different things to try and get everybody on the same page in a group session, which can be somewhat annoying for the person that's thing is number 20 on the list. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm enjoying that.
Okay. Right. Okay. And then I thought for another episode in the next series, okay, we could actually talk about the future of hypnosis. Like, where do either of us see it going? And where do our viewers and listeners see it going?
Yes. I think it's going to get rid of the idea of mysticism soon.
Yeah.
And I think that's coming out of the hard science that people are, you can see the areas, you can see them lighting up when you're saying things to people.
Well, yeah, I mean, okay, you are a medical doctor, so everything you do is science-based.
Pretty much.
As a doctor, as a medical doctor.
There is certainly, I wouldn't treat anybody with hocus pocus.
No.
But there's a lot of the unknown in the world too, like the person I was saying who came back from what should have been a kill blow. But, thankfully she survived it. Yeah.
And then, of course, we got the placebo effect.
That's actually worth talking about.
Yeah.
The placebo effect's very interesting.
Okay, well,
I think that it would be nice to talk about, and I'm blanking on people's names. I can almost read it, but I can't say it. The guy also from the north of Britain, who was in India, not Braid, the other guy starts with an E. Esdale. James Esdale. Yes. I think he's quite surprising techniques. I think they were the beginning of this truly scientific approach, the modern science of looking at hypnosis. And it gained huge popularity.
Yeah, well, it was Esdale who started to use hypnosis as a form of anaesthetic before operations.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Having had the good fortune of being in a country where he wasn't being too closely watched, I think.
In India.
300, it was in India. Did about 300 operations, probably not on people that were entirely cognizant of what was going on. But again, you can't do it without somebody's consent. You have to.
Of course, absolutely.
You have to establish a true rapport with the person so that they trust you.
Yeah.
You're not, I mean, it really is the idea that you can hypnotize somebody to do something against their will is just...
No, I mean, again, that comes from certain aspects of stage hypnosis where basically all they've done is induce some kind of confusion technique. We've just confused somebody temporarily. When you see sort of street hypnotists was the latest thing a few years back, wasn't it? As opposed to stage hypnotists. So street hypnotists who don't have a stage.
The world. Yes.
Yeah. So they basically do, when they make somebody forget their name or something, it's just a confusion technique, isn't it?
Yeah, and it comes back as soon as it's not a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember all kinds of things when we were kids we used to do on each other.
We should invite people to come back for next season. We're now in the second half of the 7th season.
Yeah, we are.
For the 8th season, you might learn some new tricks.
Oh dear me. Right, okay. Well, so we've got lots to look forward to next season, Denise, and of course next week we have Brenda Rhodes back on.
Oh, that's right. Yes, good.
We do. So do join us again next week when we will have Brenda Rhodes chatting away with us. Great episode coming up. Denise, see you next week. Okay.
Thank you, dear. Bye. We hope you've enjoyed listening. Please remember, this podcast is designed to give you an insight into therapeutic hypnosis and is for educational purposes only. So remember, consult with your own healthcare professional if you think something you've heard may apply to you or a loved one.
Feel free to contact either of us through the links in the show notes. Join us again next week.